You're listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa. A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
So we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches for tonight. Then that snow.
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Massachusetts.
14 to 22 inches of snow!
Good Thursday evening. Thanks for joining us here on The Weather Junkies. I'm Tyler Jankowski, joining the show from Connecticut alongside my counterpart, Dakota Smith, who is in Colorado this week. Dakota?
Yes. How's it going, Tyler? Good evening from Fort Collins, Colorado, and thanks for joining us tonight. We got a great show lined up tonight. We're going to be joined by a meteorologist from the National Weather Service in Boulder. We pre-recorded that, so he's not with us now, but we'll get to that in a bit. Tyler, weather here is pretty calm. We had a cold front move through yesterday, and it was pretty windy, pretty nasty actually. We had sleet and snow and rain, but nothing accumulated, and it wasn't that big of a deal out here. But it is chilly, and it looks like we're gonna get warmer this weekend. How's the weather in the Northeast?
It is a little bit wild as we end March and start April. We have kind of lost the warmth, and you probably remember we had the earliest 80-degree day on record a couple of weeks back, but any signs of springtime warmth have kind of vanished. We did make it to 72 today, but tomorrow we have showers, a little bit of thunder. Saturday is a bit of an intermediate day with clouds and showers, and an Arctic front comes through on Sunday with snow squalls, perhaps an inch of snow in the hill towns, wind gusts to 50 miles per hour, and a temperature stuck in the 30s on Sunday and next Tuesday. So as April begins, we have a number of days that are going to be in the 30s and an awful lot of wind. We had a windy day today, a couple of trees, couple of power problems, though it was mainly out to the east. And we are pretty concerned about Sunday with the gusts over 50 miles per hour. So it's a very active time, and it does look like it will turn out to be a cold start to the month.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the some GFS, I guess I was just looking at. It looks like you guys are going to get a few cold shots in the next week or two, and I don't know. It might be a little bit warmer out here actually if you guys are dealing with the cold. But no big snowstorms in our near future out here. Although that is the main topic for tonight, because we had a big one last week, which we'll get into in a few minutes here. But first, we're going to start with some of the things that are trending in the Twitterverse concerning weather. Tyler, you want to start that one?
Yes, we have our first tweet of the night from Rhode Island, and the tweet is from Mark Searles. He is the chief meteorologist at the NBC affiliate in Providence, and he tweeted today, 6:15, a couple of hours ago. We're waiting for the official data, but it looks like March will end up being the 5th warmest on record for Providence. Of course, today is March 31st, the end of the month. I mean, it almost seems like each month is going by with some sort of big record. It's so much, so often that I can honestly say that I haven't even been seeking out this record. I haven't been glued to XM Aces for the last 2 weeks trying to figure out if we're going to have the warmest March on record, because December here was by far the warmest. You look back to last May, it was the warmest. I believe September and November were in the top 10, and it looks like in southern New England this March will end up being in the top 5. I think for the Hartford area it's the 6th warmest, but still, I mean, that's an impressive stat. So the warm records, at least on a monthly basis, continue. And this tweet coming in from Rhode Island, Mark Searles, and so I think this is a region-wide thing. It's impressive.
Yeah, the warmth, El Nino has certainly done a number on on warmth records.
We also had a pretty dry month, but we've had some rain here in the last couple of days. I think we were in the top 10, but we're falling out of the top 10. So that's good news as we head into the spring. We had quite a deficit last December, ending the year. So, and I think part of that is lack of snow, all the lack of snow that we've had.
Right, yeah. So on to our next tweet. This is from the National Weather Service in Reno, and they tweeted out a time lapse of altocumulus standing lenticular clouds right around sunset. And oh my gosh, is this video just eye candy to the max? I love cloud photography, cloud video, and this one is one of the best I've ever seen. And I've gotten used to seeing these types of clouds out here in Colorado.
It's
if you're
like
listening from Colorado, what's that?
An everyday occurrence, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. And I guess not every day, but you get the gist. And I still am amazed by them every time I see them. It's just lenticular clouds are one of my favorites types of clouds. So
those are my favorite type of clouds, and it seems to me like the place where you are and anywhere out west, it seems like you just take your camera out, and as long as it has batteries, you're going to get a good picture. Here, it's a different story. You actually have to get in the car and go somewhere. But that time lapse from NWS Reno is impressive. Whenever you mix in sunset or sunrise and lenticular clouds and mountains and
mountains, yeah,
wide angle view, it's impressive, and that's exactly the video that they tweeted.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, side note, video is so nice on Twitter nowadays. It's about time.
Yeah, I agree. And adding GIFs, that's kind of a new thing.
I'm a fan of GIFs on Twitter because you can't enlarge them.
No, you don't like that?
No, I like to see full resolution.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And our next tweet is a tweet that I picked. It's a sad tweet from a television station. So many people tweeted this. So I chose a television station up in Portland, Maine, WMTW. A volunteer firefighter was killed when a tree struck his vehicle in New Hampshire a couple days ago. We've had a lot of wind here in New England. We had it a few days ago. We had it today. We're planning on it on Sunday. And the reason I chose this tweet is because sometimes I get the sense that people don't have their priorities straight in the type of weather that they're thinking about. For example, we have the threat of a little bit of snow Monday night. Some people are like, oh my gosh, how much are we getting? We might get a wet flake that makes the tree look white. I mean, we have 2 wind events before that are of much higher magnitude and much higher impact, and they're not getting attention, or at least they don't get attention unless we fight for it. So this is just an example of how, the wind may gust to 50 miles an hour. It can kill you. A tree could fall. I mean, this is a freak accident. It's a terrible tragedy. If you see the picture on Twitter, it's the truck cab is crushed. But you don't always think that something bad can happen when it's windy. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do to avoid being hit by a tree. But wind gusting to 40 and 50 is an important forecast to pay attention to. It can be a high impact forecast.
So how do you think this is a side note here, how do you think we kind of get to that place where people are taking wind threats seriously compared to like a snowstorm where they're obsessed with it?
Unfortunately, I don't know if there is a way. It's kind of like severe weather. It has to happen first, and then it's, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Right.
But it just goes to show you that, yes, there are things that have high impacts, and it doesn't involve snow.
Out here, it's interesting because we get these windstorms, and so there's no thunderstorm associated with it, or no type of precip associated with it. So I think it even gets less notice out here because it happens so often. But I mean, I think it was in the fall, we had 70 mile per hour gusts, and a bunch of our windows in the parking lot of the atmospheric science building, the car's windows blew out. And I think you're right. It doesn't give it as much press, but especially with the dry wind, no one's paying attention to
Yeah,
If it's a thunderstorm, it's a little different.
that's exactly what this is. It's just dry. We have a lot of mixing, and the winds are strong in the lowest couple thousand feet, and you get strong gusts to mix down to the surface.
Yeah. So on to our next tweet.
Yeah, is another one that I picked.
Yeah.
The Duxbury Fire Public Information Officer. It's continuing on the wind subject. By the way, if you're in New England and you listen to this show, you probably know that the Duxbury Fire Public Information Officer account is an amazing account. They do a great job with continuous updates. I'm a graphically oriented person, and they have a nice little filter with their logo that they put on that's about half transparent. So a very, very solid brand that they have on their tweets. But the tweet that we chose was numerous trees and wires down throughout town due to high winds. Treat all down wires as live. And this is in Massachusetts. As you head out to Rhode Island and Massachusetts, the winds were much stronger today, upwards of 60 miles per hour, and a lot of damage. Again, the sky is blue in the picture. The sky is blue, and trees are falling all over the place because of the strong winds. Once you have an event like this, then forecasting future events, you know how to hit the impacts hard and to say that trees will come down and there will be power outages. We've been calling for that Sunday morning since days ago. But it just highlights the importance of other weather events. And I particularly chose this tweet because, like I said, I'm a fan of the Duxbury Fire account on Twitter. I think they do a phenomenal job. And a lot of people look up to that account, or should look up to that account. It's run by Captain Rob Reardon, so give credit where credit is due.
I'll I don't follow the account, but I'll take your word for it, and maybe I'll give him a follow now. And on to our final tweet. It's a nice transition into the main topic tonight. This is from National Weather Service Boulder, where actually our guest tonight is a meteorologist at, and it's a map that shows the January 16 through March 16 % of normal snowfall across the Colorado Front Range. And I don't think there's a single place on the map that's below 100%. Oh, there is one spot. There's one spot that's below 100% snowfall percentage for January through March. And that's all the way up in the northwest corner. But everywhere else has seen at least, has seen more than their average snowfall in the past 3 months. And I can attest to that. Up here, we've seen, we had a big snowstorm at the beginning of February, and then we had another dump just last week. And it seems to be coming in these kind of big chunks. We haven't had too many small, I guess we had a few small ones, but generally I'm assuming the majority of the snowfall has come in these big snowstorms.
When you look at this is for the last 3 months, calendar year to date. When you look at the whole season, is the result the same?
I actually don't know. I think we had a kind of dry beginning of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm not 100% sure if you extend it out into like December and November. But the interesting thing about out here is we're not done. Fort Collins, the majority of storms that have dumped a foot or more in Fort Collins have come in April. So we're, especially in this El Nino pattern, I know we're fading out of El Nino, but we could still see a big snowstorm. I mean, even in the beginning of May out here, you can see a snowstorm.
That's an interesting stat, because I was about to ask that. When do you get your most snow? So you said that the most foot or more events occur in April? Yeah,
but we get our most snow in March. But it was a histogram I saw by one of my professors, and the most foot or more storms, I think you can even extend that to 16 inches or more, have come in April. But across the Front Range, March is the snowiest month, though.
Yeah, we actually did some number crunching today to see how April's snow stacks up, and it turns out that in 112 years of data since 1905, we've had 104 occurrences of measurable snow after April 1st, 43 occurrences of an inch or greater, the latest being May 9th, 1977. So we don't really get a lot of snow after April 1st, but every couple years it seems like there's at least a tenth of an inch. And we very well could have that next week. But yeah, so it seems like your winter season is a little bit shifted later than ours, which probably makes sense.
Right. But the thing is, we do get snowstorms early too. It's kind of like it's a really long winter here, but you have spurts of summer in it. That's kind of how I have developed my thought process on how the winter is out here, because it's going to be really nice in March. Don't get me wrong, but then next day, 70-degree weather, one day, then the next day you'll get a foot of snow, and kind of just ruin your whole idea that spring has begun and it's almost summer. That's kind of actually what happened last week. It got into the 70s on I guess it was Tuesday, and then that night we got 13 inches of snow. It's just crazy. So anyways, I'm still adjusting to it. So it's all still crazy to me. I'm sure that residents who live here are used to it by now, and it's no big deal, but it's certainly something different for me. And that actually leads us right into our main topic tonight, which is Colorado snowstorms along the Front Range. And we are very grateful to have on National Weather Service meteorologist Scott Entrekin from Boulder. And he was actually forecasting that day. It was quite the tough forecast. Models were off by a lot. I guess like even 12 hours out, they were still off. And he was forecasting that day, and he was part of the team that made the forecast better and was getting that data in from various models and had to adjust in a very, very short window. And I'll let you guys listen to it, but the thing I got from it is that they're used to that kind of stuff out here. So it's a very interesting conversation, and we'll go to that now. And we'd like to welcome to the show Scott Entrekin. He's a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Boulder, Colorado. And he started with the National Weather Service in 1990 in Los Angeles, and he's been in Colorado since 1994. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So just to start off, I wanted to get an idea of what your role is at the National Weather Service and what you do day to day.
Okay, I'm one of the lead forecasters, so I've been in that role for several years now. So essentially, I've got to make sure everything is working well on shift, to make sure everything's covered, and whether it be weather-wise or staff.
Gotcha. And so this show is all about big snowstorms along the Front Range. And I was hoping that you could kind of give our viewers a brief insight on what the ingredients are, maybe on a synoptic level for a big snowstorm along the Front Range of Colorado.
Okay. Yeah, well, a lot of times it's hard to get all those ingredients to come together. Obviously, you need the cold temperatures. And of course, now that we're in springtime, it's always that, say, kind of a question mark, are we going to have cold enough temperatures, or is it going to, the rain versus snow, when's it going to turn to snow, and all those
right.
kind of things. Then of course, you need the winds. And so like if we were looking at the storm we had last week, we had, if you remember, we had really warm temperatures the day before. I think we're in the 70s across most of eastern Colorado. And you call that, the warm before the storm. So you've got that good gradient of with the temperatures. You have the colder air to the north and west, and the warmest air to the south and east. And of course, with that clash, that's going to create those eventually get those winds going as well.
So when you're looking at kind of the mid-range, you're looking for a synoptic good setup. What about kind of on a local regional level when you're nowcasting? What kind of processes are you looking for there?
On the local level, a lot of it is dealing with terrain, and obviously the big problem is the Rocky Mountains, the Front Range to the west. Right. A lot of times, even more so, is the the Palmer Divide, the elevated terrain just south of Denver, because those elevations are just over 7,000 feet.
Right.
And then you got the Cheyenne Ridge just south of Cheyenne. And so those two ridges really seem to have a big effect on front range weather in Colorado. And a lot of that determines, say, if we have a northwest wind coming off the Cheyenne Ridge or through like Boulder and Longmont, that's kind of a downslope drawing wind.
Yeah.
But then as you go south, that becomes an upslope condition down through like Parker and Castle Rock. So you get all these kind of mesoscale climates going on within that storm. So even though you have a big storm, you could say, like if you go back to the 2003 March blizzard, we had like 2 inches of snow at Lyons versus you had over, 3 feet across the Palmer Divide, and that all is locally driven by the wind.
Yeah, that pesky Cheyenne Ridge has definitely gotten me. I'm up in Fort Collins, and I can see the effects when we get a kind of a northeasterly kind of flow, and it's not the greatest. I feel like last year, between Boulder and Denver was like a jackpot, and up in Fort Collins we didn't get much from many of the storms. I guess that had to deal with the pattern that set up last winter.
It seemed like Fort Collins got missed on the good many of those storms we had.
Yeah, so that was my first year in Fort Collins, and so I kind of got this whole idea that Fort Collins is just this snow hole, very irrational kind of idea. But up until the past year, I lived on the East Coast, and from my experience, just in the past year and a half, it seems a lot harder to forecast here than on the East Coast, especially when it comes to snowstorms. I guess my initial thoughts are the mountains, obviously, and maybe storms aren't on shore for nearly as long. But I was wondering, from your experience, if you could comment on
that. You mean on?
So from what I can tell, it seems a lot harder to forecast out here, at least the snowstorm compared to the East Coast. And I don't know if you have any experience with that. I guess you haven't actually forecasted out there, but I guess what makes it hard to forecast out here?
Yeah, and again, I think the mountains play a big role in that.
Right.
A lot of times, the storms are, going through the Great Basin, and then they hit the mountains, and then there's kind of they kind of get disorganized, and then you kind of where is that storm going to re-intensify as it crosses the mountains and goes into eastern Colorado and then out into the Central Plains. And and as we looked in last week's storm, that was, of course, our biggest challenge, was that storm track. And because really that storm track, if it gets displaced even as little as 100, 200 miles, that's the difference between what we had, almost 2 feet of snow in some portions of the Denver area, versus the earlier forecast of only 2 to 4 inches.
Yeah, so I'd like to get into the storm that happened last week. Was it just a general shift in all the model guidance that kind of spurred that, I guess, last minute kind of trend to more snow?
Right. Yeah. Initially, there was some kind of waffling back and forth, even the several days beforehand. But the main track was, it was going to go intensify more into western Kansas, and we would kind of be left with kind of a stronger downsloping flow off the Front Range.
Right.
And so we were kind of thinking, well, we're only going to get maybe 2 to 4 inches here. We were kind of focusing further east of Denver, across the plains, that they would get kind of the brunt of it.
Right.
Well, that day before, leading up to the storm, the models, or the track of the storm was slowing down a little bit further south and west. And so even as little as 6 to 10 hours before the event started, the models were actually displacing that main storm center a couple hundred miles, back to the west. So instead of being in western Kansas, the storm ended up being a little, I would say, south of Denver, across El Paso County during that late Tuesday night and early Wednesday morning. And so that essentially just created huge amounts of upslope and moisture and snowfall through the area.
For some of the viewers that might aren't from the area, I wanted to give them a brief overview of kind of how the forecast developed. So 12 hours before precip started, Fort Collins and Boulder were like 2 to 3, and Denver was 3 to 4. And Denver had a winter storm watch. I believe it was earlier than that even. And then about 8 hours before, it got upped a little bit, and then Denver went into the blizzard warning. And then 4 hours before precip started, I say precip because it started as rain.
Right.
Yeah, Fort Collins was 6 to 8, Boulder was 4 to 6, and Denver was 8 to 12. And I believe Fort Collins was in a winter storm warning, and Denver was in a blizzard warning still. And then the actual kind of the snowfall accumulation ended up being a widespread foot, some places over 15, a few very local places over 20 inches. Does that analysis sound about right to you?
Yeah, and we had it was hard keeping because once that rain changed to snow, I was working midnight shift, and we were starting to get some really big snowfall rates. We're getting 2 to 3 inches, snowfall an hour. We started getting reports, especially up through Larimer County, and that eventually started moving into Boulder County as well. So yeah, things were really ramping up quickly in that event.
Yeah, what's that like during your shift? You have to kind of, I don't know, maybe scramble, and I guess you have to really be watching the trends. That close to a snowstorm, it was quite a dramatic trend.
Right, and the evening shift. So this would have been Tuesday evening.
Right.
Before I came in, the shift before me, they saw a lot of these trends starting to happen, and so they started kind of increasing even, what we had with the winter storm warnings, and then some of those, like for Denver, went up to the blizzard warnings during those evening hours, and then through the overnight shift, it looked like the foothills were going to get hammered as well, and so then we had to upgrade those to warnings as well for the foothill communities, because we just had much deeper upslope, and especially with the water content. And the water content was just a big challenge in itself as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was following, and right before I went to bed, I was like, oh my gosh, I was expecting like 2 to 4, and then I wasn't paying attention to the models that much, to be fair. Yeah, so I'm curious, did you get any feedback? Did I know a lot of times on social media, I don't know if any of the people at Boulder on social media, but a lot of times they'll get negative feedback, and it's just kind of very negative. And when something like this happens, was there anything like that?
Not a great deal. I mean, I don't remember seeing a lot of it. I think people, are a little surprised, but the idea is we gave them at least a good 12 to 18 hours kind of advance, that those amounts were going to be heavier than initially thought. Of course, the school kids were happy. They got another school day, at least for the ones that weren't on spring break that week.
That's great to hear. It tells me people are a lot maybe used to kind of unpredictable weather, or they're either nicer. Because I know if this happened, like, I don't know, in a major metropolitan on the East Coast, people would be freaking out. So I guess I don't know.
Yeah, we get our share of the negativity part, and as a meteorologist, you just have to you expect that with the job, and you kind of have to roll with it, because you're going to get the good with the bad.
Right. So kind of shifting here, a lot of the snow fell overnight, and so schools were closed in the morning, and I'm assuming a lot of people stayed home. What do you think would have happened if maybe this fell during the day, and at least kind of in the Boulder and Fort Collins area, people weren't expecting? Do you think it would have had more of an impact?
Well, it did. I mean, and typically in the spring when we get these snowstorms and they happen during the day.
Right.
Of course, we've got already warmer temperatures. The temperatures weren't all that cold. We're sitting there around 30 degrees or lower 30s. You already had warm surface pavements and stuff. And so typically in a spring thing, unless you've got the heavy snowfall rates, which we did, you would just see a lot of melting and not just mainly slush and stuff on the roads. But I think in this storm, the big case was those snowfall rates.
Yeah.
And those kind of overcome anything with the temperatures, and you're just you will start to accumulate that stuff on highways and roadways, and leading to some really bad conditions. And we don't see those, especially across the Denver area for that long a time. And we saw those snowfall rates for, I don't know, a good 6, 7, 8, almost up to 10 hours of, a couple inches an hour.
Yeah.
That's why it doesn't take long. And then, all of a sudden you've got almost 2 feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah. The upslope is totally new to me. And wow. I mean, I think it was like 10 to 12 inches between like 6 and 8 hours. That was just incredible. You could have gone to sleep and then woken up and had no idea it snowed, but you could have never seen a flake in the sky. So it was pretty incredible rates with this storm.
Yeah, that was, personally for me, that was some of the heaviest snow I've ever seen. I drove home in that into Weld County that Wednesday morning, and boy, wow. that was about the worst, one of the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah. So it's been a pretty good winter out here thus far, if you're a snow lover, that is.
Yeah.
I was curious if you had any inkling to kind of the pattern we're going to go into, and if it's conducive for snowstorms.
Yeah, we're still in a pretty good El Nino pattern, and the trend is for that to weaken and eventually get into a La Nina pattern by next winter. But I think we're going to still see the remnants of El Nino at least through spring and early summer, and I would expect we'll still see a fairly wet spring going into April and May, maybe even early in June. Kind of like what we kind of saw last spring. Ended up being very wet as well.
Right. So one last question. We asked this to all of our guests, and it's kind of a question for the younger viewers in our audience. And that is, over the course of your career, what has been the most important skill or skills you've had to use?
Skill or skills. Probably a lot of it is in the communications part of it. And that's something as a meteorologist, I think a lot of us are kind of weak coming into this field. And now, especially with the advent with social media, doing things, these radio broadcasts or when television stations come out. And I think sometimes maybe we're a little ill prepared for that. And so it's a skill we've kind of learned over the years of getting into this meteorology field.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. It's great advice. I've learned that communication is very important, especially when I'm bad at it. So Scott, thanks for joining the show. If you wanna follow Scott on Twitter, you can follow him at SENTREKI. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, a big thank you to Scott from the National Weather Service in Denver, I believe it is. Denver and Boulder, for talking about the snowstorm there that surprised many people. I would say for me, being from New England, the thing that fascinates me the most is the sensitivity to such an event. Not that people in Colorado don't care, but I get the sense that because of the immense variation with the terrain and the forecast confidence, sometimes low confidence, that it's received a little bit better out there. I can say that if we had a forecast that was a foot too low here, we forecast 2 inches and get 14 inches, it would be a disaster.
Yeah, just think if it was 2 inches and then you got 20 plus inches, like that's a yeah, you said it, that's a disaster. But out here it wasn't that big of a deal. It certainly caused some issues, but it wasn't the biggest deal ever.
And before we hang up the mic for tonight, we don't want to end without mentioning the severe weather that's going on in the southern portion of the country. Numerous tornado warnings starting this afternoon. A couple right now, actually, in the Birmingham area. And a lot of us look up to James Spann, a video circulating right now on Twitter of him saying live on TV, "Don't be haters," because they
Wow.
are live in primetime TV covering the
Oh, I
tornadoes.
see. I see.
And that
Yeah,
is
well,
his message.
I mean, it's his time to be on, right? It looks like there's 3 or 4 tornado warnings in northern Alabama right now, and yeah, seriously, don't be
I'm
haters.
pretty sure there's actually a large tornado debris signature near Eldridge. I am in the process of using Radar Scope 3.0 to figure this out. It's one of those things that you don't really want to broadcast until you're 100% confident, even though that's exactly what I just did. But yeah, so
Just going through Twitter, I see that, and yeah, there definitely is one.
Okay, I
Um,
was avoiding Twitter because I wanted to figure it out on my own, but
don't get the raw data. Yeah,
sometimes that can give you confidence.
it's kind of a confusing place where there's a tornado around. Kansas, Alabama. Um, yeah, it looks like a fairly major signal there. Yikes. Well, hopefully it doesn't do too much damage. Yesterday, there was a pretty well broadcast tornado in Tulsa. I don't know if you saw the live helicopter video
I
of that, but
didn't. I think I might have fallen. I was probably at the gym.
yeah, well, the video was amazing. They had a helicopter on it, and they saw the tornado touch down, go up, touch down, and some of the vorticity that you could see was, oh my gosh, incredible. Certainly weather eye candy for any kind of weather junkie. But yeah, we just wanted to mention the severe weather that's going on right now because it is a weather show, and it seems that this has happened before where we talk about snowstorms and there's a weather outbreak, and then we talk about severe weather and then there's a big snowstorm. But that's just the way it goes, I guess. Anything else, Tyler?
Yeah, we brought up the TDS, which is confirmed. That always fascinates me. That's something we want to talk about on a future episode. Don't want to lock us into a specific date and a specific guest, but we have a few people that we're reaching out to, some very great minds doing research on radar and especially tornadoes and tornado debris signatures. So we want to talk about that in greater detail now that severe season has begun. We'll do that hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good. But that's going to do it for tonight. And if you're not following us on Twitter, you can follow us at the WX Junkies. We're also on Facebook. You can listen to this podcast on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, or Stitcher. If you listen on iTunes, give us a rating and a review, whether it's good or bad. We just want to hear from you. And for Tyler and myself, we'll see you next week.